Good day guys, so in this tutorial we're going to be looking at JavaScript variables and commenting in JavaScript. Now for the sake of this lesson and for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to be using the embed method of including JavaScript into our HTML. What do I mean? I'm going to be using this style where we write the script, where we write our JavaScript code inside our script tag. See there, yeah, inside our script tag, right? So now today we are going to be looking at variables. Now a variable in JavaScript is like a container that is used for holding value, right? And so whenever you display that container, it is actually the value in that container that is going to be displayed or that is going to be used. What do I mean? For example, let's say I have a JavaScript. Now we use var to specify that we are about to write a variable. Let's say our variable name is x, and inside x I choose to store a string called John, right? So now by the time I come down here and let's say I alert x, now by the time I alert x, since x is a variable, it's not x that will show, rather it is the value John inside of x that will be displayed. So I save that and I come down here and I run my code, and you can see John is being displayed here, right? For example, if I change the value from John, let's say to Sarah, save that, run it here again, as you can see Sarah now is being displayed. So what is happening is that the value that I store inside x is what is being displayed here, right? And so now let me do something else. You can even store numbers, integers and the likes. So let me store 6 there, save. I come here and I run that, and as you can see 6 is being displayed. You can even do algebra with your variables. For example, inside x I have 6. Let me create another variable called y, and then you can name your variable any name. X is the name of this variable, y is the name of this variable, and inside y I assign a value called let's say I assign 10 to it, right? And then I now come down here and create another variable. Let's say this variable is called z, and this time I do x, which is my first variable, but now I don't need to write that var again since I've already created the variable. Var keyword here is what you use to create your variable, but once you have created your variable, you don't need to be including the var keyword again. So now you're hearing me say keyword. What is a keyword? A keyword is a word that has been reserved for use by the scripting language JavaScript. It means that you cannot use the keyword anyhow in your programming and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that in a short while. So I'm just going to go here and do x plus y, and then I'm going to alert. Now when I do my x and I add y to my x, I'm going to store the new value inside z, so I'm going to be alerting z, right? I'm going to save that and I'm going to run the code. Okay, let me go back and see what went wrong there. Okay, yes, as you can see it has not saved. Okay, so I'm going to run the code now, and as you can see 16 is what is showing. Why 16? Because 6 is stored in x, 10 is stored in y, and then I'm adding x plus y, and that's what brought about the 16 that you saw. So now let's talk about something else called identifier. What is an identifier? Well, you see this x here, you see this y here, you see this z. They are not actually called the names of the variable, rather they are called the identifiers of that variable, right? So instead of saying x is the name of this variable x, yes, x is actually the name of the variable, but in programming language we call them identifiers. Now there are some basic rules you must take into consideration when you want to use an identifier for your variable, when you want to name your variable, there are some things you must put into consideration. Number one, your variable must always, the name of your variable must always begin with a letter. So I cannot name my variable 3, for example. No, as you can see, the color is even different, and this red sign here is showing me that there's an error, there's something wrong with my code. Rather, my variable name or identifier must always start with a letter. Also, my variable name is case sensitive. What do I mean? It means that var x, or let me use y in this case, var y, small letter var y is different from capital letter var y. Now, the scripting language JavaScript sees these two variables as two different variables. Why? Because one is small case, small letter, and the other one is uppercase or big letter. Do you understand? So it's seeing them as two different variables. That's what it means when it says your variable name is case sensitive. You can name your variable name anything like we've spoken about, as long as it follows this rule. So let's say I name my variable name name, and here I name this one, let's say s name. Do you get it? And then in my name I store John. In my s name I store let's just say something like Obidi, that is his surname, right? Now if I go here and I change this one, instead of writing s name, I choose to write name in capital letter. These two variables are two different variables. Why? Because they are of different cases. And because they are of different cases, the programming language or scripting language, in this case JavaScript, sees these two variables as two different variables, even though normally speaking you can see that both of them are named name, but one is uppercase while the other one is lowercase. And also another rule when creating an identifier for your variable or when naming your variable is that you cannot use a keyword. Remember we spoke about a keyword just now. You cannot name your variable something like var. An error will show. Why? Because you cannot name your variable using a keyword. And then lastly, let's talk about, just before we talk about commenting, let's talk about something called assignments. Assignment is simply an assignment is an operator, right? This equal to sign that you are seeing here, in this case, in this scenario, in this context, we call it an assignment operator. Why? Because this equal to is what is letting our language know that I'm storing this value John inside this variable called name, right? So in programming terms, I'm assigning John to name, and this equal to sign here is what lets the programming language know that I'm assigning John to name. So this one here is called an assignment operator. Don't worry if you don't understand that. We are going to go in depth into operators in lessons to come, right? So you are going to get that very well. And so lastly, let's talk about comment. What is a comment? A comment is what you use so that when your scripting language is interpreting your code, as soon as it comes to where you've created a comment, it will jump over it. Now the good thing about commenting is that it allows you to write whatever you want on that line that you are commenting, and you can use it to create documents in such a way that as I'm writing my code, I can just create a reminder. For example, when I want to write a comment in JavaScript, I use this sign, 2/. As you can see now, it has turned green, and when I use this 2/, I can now write anything. Now when my JavaScript, when this language is being interpreted, like when it's running in my browser, when the interpreter comes to this line, it will jump over it, right? And it will just interpret it directly as it is without giving me an error. And that's the beauty about comments. So now with comments, as I'm writing my code, I can write things that will allow me to know what I'm doing. For example, I can just say Okay, I know you're wondering what do I mean by I declared a variable. Like I said, when you are creating a variable for the first time, you use this var keyword and your variable name, right? But in programming language, what we call that is called declaring a variable. So creating your variable for the first time is also known as declaring a variable. So that's why I said I declared a variable called name alone. So this thing here that you're seeing is called a comment. It's called a comment. It is not interpreted by the interpreter, and it will just show basically on the page on your code like that. Do you understand? It will not be displayed for the user to see. And so that's that today about comments and variables. As we go deeper, you're going to be understanding more and more and more of this concept. So I'm going to see you in the next lesson.